Hello, fight fans, and welcome to the Combat Challenge podcast. My guest today is a former lightweight athlete with 17 professional fights under his name. He's also the former Ultimate Combat and Cage Warriors lightweight champion. Also, he recently got his black belt for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Jimmy Johnson and is the head coach of Trojan Free Fighters, Mr. Paul Sutherland. Thank you, my brother, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, man, I'm looking forward to this, Paul. I really am. So the first question I want to ask from you, Paul, is, and this is something I ask all the athletes and the coaches, their mixed martial arts journey. If you could let us know from a young age what sort of sports you got into, what disciplines, and how you ended up on that conveyor belt where you are today.
Okay, so, from a young sort of child, I've always been into sports, very sporty, when I went to school. I was in all the sports teams and stuff, so I was always very, very active. And then when I was, let's say, 14, I knew my brother obviously been training martial arts for a very long time as well. So he did Kung Fu and kickboxing. And he decided to open up an academy in Gloucester, my hometown. So from there, he obviously asked me, whether I'd be interested in, joining, because obviously I had a lot of energy, did a lot of sports, did a little bit of boxing before I started the sort of martial arts. So in 1986, that's when I first started. And that's my brother got me actually into the sport of, kickboxing and Kung Fu, which was just stand up, obviously. So from there, I trained with him for probably 10 to 12 years when I got my black belt in both kickboxing and Kung Fu. Did a hell of a lot of competitions. I was competing regular. And then I think it was sort of mid 90s, I used to get the Combat magazine in the newsagents. And I started reading about the Ultimate Fighting Championship, #1 and #2, and about some guy called Gracie. And so I was really, really interested in that. I've always wanted to test myself in competition. I did a lot of kickboxing competitions, growing up. And I always really wanted to test myself just as an athlete. I didn't ever think I was a tough guy or anything like that. It was just as an athlete, really. So I managed to rent a video of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I think it was 2. And then I was just literally blown away by what, Hoist Gracie was doing on that. And I thought, I got to learn this, So this is probably late 1990s. From there, I sought out everywhere to try and get some sort of jiu-jitsu or grappling training. And I found a local Japanese jiu-jitsu club, which was in Cheltenham. And I went down there, had a look. I had a look there and it looked really great. They were doing, yes, some traditional stuff, but they were doing a lot of judo-based techniques, throws, arm locks, chokes on the ground, and I just thought, yeah, I'm gonna enroll in this. So I started off with that. So that's how I basically got started. So from doing Japanese jiu-jitsu, I did quite a few what they used to call jiu-jitsu kumite, which was like point fighting, like with strikes, and then as soon as you get into a clinch, you had to stop striking, and you had to grapple them. So I did a lot of those tournaments, sort of like in the late 90s. Leading up to sort of the early 2000s. I got, pretty decent at that, but again, it wasn't enough competition. I wanted to test myself in full contact. Obviously, having doing some full contact fights in kickboxing and Sanshou before, full contact was the route I wanted to go. And then from there, that's how I got started. I teamed up locally with a guy called Mark Woodard, who's quite renowned in the mixed martial arts world. He's a retired referee now. And then we kind of like joined forces, and he became my head coach. And I started fighting professional, amateur first, and then I started fighting professionally straight afterwards. And then hence my career went on. And then obviously I joined Trojan in 2004, I believe it was. And then I've been in Trojan ever since, and now I'm the boss. So yeah, it's been a very long road.
Now, the Trojan free fighters, was that something that was already established and you kind of became an integrated within, or was it something that you created? Can you tell us about the Trojan free fighters?
Yeah, well, the Trojan Free Fighters gym is obviously we were originally a Thai boxing gym, and the guy who actually owned the Cheltenham branch was Charlie Joseph. So he was my first sort of stand-up coach. I owe everything sort of like to him, to be honest, because he was the one that we had a conversation. He said, "Oh, come down and do some Thai boxing." We started doing some Thai boxing. We hit off a really, really good relationship. We're almost like brothers, you know. So we hit off a really good relationship, and then obviously we started speaking about the mixed martial arts. And he said he was going to set a gym up and establish a mixed martial arts team, and he wanted me to be one of the fighters in the team. So obviously from there, that's when I joined Trojan. Obviously, I've never left ever since. So that was an integral part of my sort of growth, especially as a coach as well, is coming in and being a part of that club.
Now, talking about coaches, you mentioned there, Paul. Are there coaches in your life that have been significant on your martial arts journey? And if so, if you can share that with us, and why were they significant to you?
Yeah, well, obviously, my first ever coach was my brother. Obviously, we're very tight. So Clive Sutherland, he runs his own academy in Gloucester as well. He teaches kickboxing and kung fu. So obviously, he was the one who like got me from being sort of like a not a tearaway, but a sort of teenager with no sort of direction. And obviously, it's got me focused into the martial arts, and that really changed my life. So he was obviously my first coach. My Japanese jiu-jitsu coach was Ross Inakaro. A lot of the people that you see on the scene now, either as coaches or officials, people like Mark Goddard, Mark Collett, they all came from the same association. Ronnie Mann, we all met in that association, so we were all under that association with Ross. So he was quite integral because he was the first guy who ever taught me any sort of grappling. Again, I give a thanks to Mark Woodard as well. He was my first MMA coach, and all the titles that I won were actually under him. So I give him a lot of props as well. There's so many people. Charlie Joseph gave me the chance to obviously join the professional Trojan team. Got a lot of opportunities. Didn't fight, but went over as a coach to Pride and things like that. Many, many times. I've been over to Japan so many times. So it gave me a great opportunity as well as help me coach, and obviously taught me a lot in the process as well. And I would say probably another one would be Saeed Ismaili. He was my first wrestling coach. So I learned a lot of freestyle wrestling from Saeed, and I'm still under him now. In fact, like my team, I take my team there. He comes down to my gym for seminars. I take my son there as well to learn from him. So he's a fantastic wrestling coach. My current jiu-jitsu coach is Jimmy Johnson, who recently got my black belt under him. He is just inspiration to me. I've never met somebody so giving. He will give a lot. He will give you his time, any time of the day. If I call him for anything, or if I need him for a seminar, or if there's a certain technique that I want to study, he'll always help me, and he's the best jiu-jitsu coach I've had in terms of, skill set. His skill set is fantastic. And just a great teacher and mentor for me as well, Chico Mendes as well. He was my first sort of proper jiu-jitsu coach. I trained with him for many years. I've trained with quite a few boxing different coaches, and for Thai boxing, Tony Myers, he was my coach as well. From Muay Thai. But yeah, there's so many people. Two mentors, which I sort of like lost a little bit of love for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a little while during my career, and they really got me back on track. And that was Luke and Andy Costello. Andy Costello was a former training partner of mine. He's still a good friend to this day, and his son Luke as well. His son Luke is absolutely fantastic at jiu-jitsu. He's such a natural talent. He was a former world champion at brown belt. So yeah, they really got my head straight and back on track, with the jiu-jitsu as well. So I do owe them a lot of thanks for my development and my refocus back into Brazilian jiu-jitsu and love for it.
During your martial arts journey, specifically in mixed martial arts, Paul, is there any fight that you can look back and think that was a rewarding fight, and it don't have to be financial, you know, it don't have to be a win, it could be some sort of adversity you overcame? Is that something that you could share with us?
Yeah, it's definitely not financial, that's for sure, because there's no money in mixed martial arts. But the fight that really sticks out to me was when I fought he's a good friend of mine now, Ozzy Haluk. He's from Manchester, Ground and Pound, I think they were called. And I fought him for the Cage Warriors title. And at the time, everyone was doubting me, saying I was going to get knocked out, blah, blah, blah. You know, and I really went into that fight really fueled with fire, to be honest. I was so focused. I trained so hard for that fight. I managed to stop him in, I think it was the second round. And then I was, crowned the first ever Cage Warriors lightweight champion. That means a lot to me because, to be fair, I'm only 5'6". At the time, the lightweight division was the lowest weight class. If it was today, I'd probably be a 135 pounder, a bantamweight or a flyweight, for my frame and stuff, you know. So I was fighting guys a lot bigger than me at the time, and I was still winning, you know, which was, great. So yeah, that fight sticks out to me over anything else, to be honest, throughout my career.
We're in testing times, my brother. With all this pandemic and lockdown and COVID that's happening. Are you able to keep yourself active? And if so, how are you able to do that?
Yeah, obviously owning my own gym. I've got access to my gym. I've also kitted my home garage out as well as a gym, so I can train here, or I can train there. Obviously, all my family train as well. I've got 2 kids and a wife, so they all train jiu-jitsu. Obviously, my son, he trains everything MMA and jiu-jitsu. He's very, very good. So he's my best training partner, actually. He's only 11, but he's got so much skill and he's very mature for his age. So I spend a lot of time developing him. Because obviously at one stage or another, I'm going to retire. So I want to have my gym over to him, you know. So I've got to invest my time in him as well, you know. But he's very, very talented. So that kind of motivates me to, actually get my family better as well. But yeah, I pretty much train pretty much every day. I don't train like how I was a fighter or a competitor before, but I just keep myself relatively fit and just keep my skills up, really. But during the pandemic, all you can do is pretty much take my dog for a walk, train my kids, do the homeschooling. That's pretty much it, really.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to quite a few athletes and especially coaches like yourself, Paul, and they're saying similar thing, that they're trying to make the most of the time, but there's other things that they got to deal with, like you said with you, with homeschooling. It's something that was unexpected, but it's got to be done, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's they can't go to school. You've got to help them, educate them. And to be fair, the schools that my kids go to, they're really, really good with the online support. But I know other parents, that their schools are not doing half as much. So they have to entertain their kids all day, So I really feel for them.
I'm aware that Trojan Free Fighters is quite a busy gym and there's different disciplines there.
Yeah.
Can you share with us what disciplines are specifically that you cover there, and also which coaches are there and what role do they play at Trojan Free Fighters?
Yeah, so basically I'm the head coach. I do 90% of the coaching myself at the moment. Years gone by, when I was just the MMA coach, we used to have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach that came in, a wrestling coach, a boxing coach, a Muay Thai coach. We had each individual style that came in, obviously. But with myself being, would have trained under those guys as well. I do 90% of the coaching. My other coach, which helps out, is Mario Said. He's one of my fighters, obviously. And he's our other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. So they've got basically access to 2 black belts. My students have myself and Mario. And then I bring in respected coaches in for seminars and workshops and stuff every sort of couple of months as well. So my jiu-jitsu coach, Jimmy, I'll always bring him in every two months or so. And then Saeed Ismaili as well. He'll always come in and maybe do some wrestling seminars, But yeah, predominantly I do 90% of the coaching. I basically teach all aspects of mixed martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and we do like a striking orientated classes as well, which is more K1-ish, but it's more striking for MMA, to be fair. And then obviously Mario comes in and he supports me with the jiu-jitsu, and he's got his own class of jiu-jitsu, and he runs his own gym in Bristol as well. So I try and support him with that.
Now, you mentioned Mario, he's one of your students, and I had him on the podcast the other week. What a character he is, isn't he, brother?
Oh, he's a character, all right. Yeah, he's a character and a half. Fair play to him. He's got so much energy. It's never a dull moment when you're in his presence, you know. But he's a very good team player as well. So he's an integral part of our pro team as well, because he gives a lot of input, always puts himself out. If I'm have to corner one of the guys, he'll always be my second corner man. Or if I'm away doing something, he'll always cover my classes. So he's an absolute team player, 100%. As well as him fighting and being a father and running his own gym as well. So I couldn't fault him in any of those senses.
Yeah, for sure. And he was singing your praises, brother. He definitely was. Now, one of the things about Mario is he's doing really well for himself in competing. Is he at Brave FC? Is that where he's competing now? And he's under your umbrella as such. Are there other students that we need to have on our radar that are either out there competing, or people who are going to be on that conveyor belt that myself and the viewers need to be aware of?
Yeah, I've got, quite a smaller. We used to have a huge team. Like every weight class, we used to have guys, and they were fighting over, over in America. Some were in the UFC, some were in Bellator, some were in Pride. I had so many different fighters. But now, because I've condensed the size of my gym, and I spent a lot of time investing my time in the group of younger guys that were coming through. They were just starting out then, and now they're starting to flourish now. So I've got, as well as Mario, I've got so many guys that have been there with me from sort of 9-10 years ago. The two prominent guys I've got coming through at the moment, which a lot of eyeballs are on it, the two Figlak brothers. They're both fighting on Cage Warriors, Michael Figlak and Matt Figlak. They're really good prospects. I've been training both those guys since they were 16, 17 years old. They're mid-20s now, so they've been with me in the gym for a very long time. I've got other guys who I've trained, from day one, people like Lawrence Tracy, Chris Astley, Johnny Bryant. And then the sort of gold standard of my gym is the kids that I'm bringing through now. It's like a golden era of kids I've got bringing through now. So they're at the moment, they're anything from 9 years old up to probably about 14, 15, 16 at the moment. And then you'll start to see those really flourish in the next few years. Definitely, I spend a lot of time and invest a lot of time and effort into the younger kids, with my kids' programs. Yeah, again, in the past, we've had guys join our team, and we've had such a big team, but we had guys coming from everywhere. But in all fairness, they were already skilled athletes, so you can't really take credit for them being a success because they already had a skill set, and they already were what they were. As a coach, I get way more out of respect and coaching from when I take kids from doing having done absolutely nothing or very limited sort of training, and then you see them flourish. Some of them are champions, like amateur champions. Some are coming through the ranks. I've got in my kids program, I think I've got 4 or 5 world jiu-jitsu champions in my through my kids. My son, he got bronze medal at the Pans last year in California, which is the biggest jiu-jitsu competition in the world. And to get any medal in that, because the level's so high, we must be doing a good job here, and it's just a testament how hard these kids train. So I get way more satisfaction out of seeing, people come from no amateur fights all the way through their amateur through to their pro, similar to what the Figlaks have done. I get way more satisfaction doing that than obviously if someone's already come in from another team and they're already trained. Yes, you do get a little bit you have got an input, but they're already skilled anyway. So they already are what they are, you know. You just add in a few things, you know, which is great, you know. But I personally, as a coach, I get more satisfaction from taking a kid sort of like off the street who got no prospects, and you teach them all the way through. You teach them about martial arts, you teach them about life a little bit, and then they come through and they actually make something of themselves, you know, which means a hell of a lot more to me than, you know, just training somebody who's already skilled.
For sure. And you mentioned the Figlak brothers. Now, I spoke to Michael the other week. I caught him off guard, you know, Paul, because I rung him up, I was chatting to him, and then all of a sudden I broke out in a bit of Polish to him, and I'm like, I was saying, "Dzień dobry, Michał," and he's like, "Whoa, yeah, people don't call me Michał, you know, they only know me as Michael because it's pronounced as Michał." And then Matt, I was saying, you know, tell your brother, and I even called him by his proper name, you know, Mateusz. I said, tell Mateusz, and I'm going to give a message now, right? Because that guy hasn't replied to my message. So, przepraszam, pan Mateusz. Gdzie Mateusz? Chodź, szybko, which loosely translates is, excuse me, Mr. Mateusz, where are you? Come on, quickly, because I need him on this podcast. So I'm going to keep that message in for him so you can show him.
I'm sure he'll see it, yeah. I had no clue what you said, by the way, but
but I caught him off guard, Paul. He was like, "Whoa, we just blow like you got to do it, brother, don't you? You got to do it."
Of course, bro.
Now, one thing, now people might not be aware of this, but for quite a while and for many years, you've been an official on the UFC. Can you tell us how that came about and what role do you play as an official on UFC?
Yeah, so I've been a judge for the UFC, one of their judges since about 2011, so we're coming up to 10 years. The way I got started with that, I actually, one of my former training partners who's actually passed away, which is Chris Watt, he was actually a judge on the UFC, and he sort of, you know, with my experience, and at that time I was obviously, I retired then. So I don't think you can really do it if you're a current fighter. So I'd actually retired then. So good conversations with him, good conversations with people like Mark Woodard. And they said, give him a call, write your CV down, we'll forward it through, and then we'll see how it goes, you know? So I basically did all that, did all my CV, all my history. And, you know, at that time I'd been doing some judging, obviously unpaid, just on smaller shows in the UK and, you know, and stuff like that. And then obviously doing my own shows as well. So I had obviously a little bit of experience with that. Sent it over to the UFC. The head guy, Mark Ratner, saw something in that. They got in contact. So they give me sort of like a trial period. And then they said, yeah. And then they started giving me assignments then.
So with like the trial period, Paul, how does that work? Do they kind of say, okay, we're going to give you, you know, do this show, or do you kind of shadow a judge first? How does that work?
What you will do is you do some series of shadow judging. So you would do 2 or 3 shows, you shadow judge, obviously still give your scorecards in. And then obviously they assess your scorecards against obviously what they deem, and then obviously from the legit judges that are there. And then they sort of vet you that way. And then after you've done that for a period of time, they will either say yes or no, and they'll give you an opportunity. They give you an opportunity, like on the undercards of some of the shows, you might only do one fight at a time. And then obviously the more sort of experience you get, the more they will give you. So yeah, it basically works that way. And I think it's kind of like the same now, though they do have, I would recommend anybody trying to get into any sort of officiating, whether it be reffing or judging, is going through the IMAF course through Mark Goddard. So I would recommend probably going through an IMAF course, officiating course, before you sort of start looking at any of the big shows. And obviously you have to put your time in as well, you know, smaller shows, amateur shows, you know, things like that. You've got to do X amount of hours before you get signed up to do like professional shows, you know.
Well, years ago, and I'm talking maybe a decade ago, I went on that Mark Goddard course that he'd put together for refereeing and judging. I don't know if you're aware of it. And I going on one of them, you know, and I found it really eye-opening and understanding the 10-point system and how it
Yeah,
worked. And
yeah,
because before that, you're involved in MMA, but until you actually break it down and know the structure and the scoring system, you then realize how little you knew about the judging and
yeah,
ref side, right?
yeah. I mean, myself, I've gone through the same course with Mark. He's taught me so much. We travel a lot. Myself and him and the rest of the team, and I always try and tap into knowledge from him. To be fair, so he's quite a strong mentor for me in terms of the officiating as well. Yeah, and it's quite easy, sat at home saying that this guy won the fight, that guy won the fight, and if you don't know the criteria, you're just making it up. Okay, the fights are judged through a certain criteria, and you have to use that sliding scale, in order to judge each round, to judge each fight. So this is why I think it's important that people do educate themselves, even if they're, to be honest, even if I wasn't an official and I was just a trainer, just a coach, I would go on one of these courses because it will help you to train your athletes. How to win rounds, what the judges are looking for, and things like that. Because or even that sort of knowledge does help just from a coach's standpoint or a fighter, to be honest.
Well,
So I always recommend people doing that.
Well, it's interesting you're saying that, Paul, because the
Yeah,
reason I went on Mark Goddard's course was because I had my own promotion.
yeah,
And I wanted to make sure that if anyone comes to me and any fighter starts to complain, and if I've watched it, I can say, well, hold on a minute. And in
yeah,
my mind, I've got a structure and a format that I can work off, right?
yeah, yeah. That's it. That's it. Obviously, if you run your own shows, you've got to know the rules. You've got to know who to employ, if they're doing a good job or not. It's absolutely priceless information, in my opinion. If you go on one of these courses, because it'll serve you well right across the board in MMA. Not just officiating, but if you run your own shows, if you're a fighter, if you're a coach, it works all the way through.
Now, it must be awesome, Paul, even if you're only judging maybe one or two fights, but to be there cage side in the UFC and with all the audience there and the ambience that it creates, it must be awesome, right?
Yeah, it is. The biggest show that I did was the Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. I actually did the main event there. So there was like 57,000 people there. So that was pretty unique. But to be honest, once you get really, really experienced, you don't really, that part of it, you it's sort of like dead to you. You're there to do a job. I'm not there to be a fanboy or, with the fighters or anything like that. You're there to do a job. So you take it really professionally. I think when you first go to these shows, it kind of like, you get blown away by the whole experience, and the experience is absolutely great. But once you do get experience, you've just got to focus that you're there to do a job, and because these outside things will influence your decision. Otherwise, if you get influenced by the crowd or you get intimidated by the coaches and stuff like that, you're not going to do your job if you're taking note of what's happening on the outside. So I just look at it just as a privileged but regular job, that I'm in. And like all the fan sort of stuff, it doesn't really bother me. I'm just there to do a job and do the best of my ability. What I've taken all my experience from like the last 35 years. So I think it puts me in, relatively good stead to try and do that.
Sure. Well, Brother Paul, it might not bother you, right? But next time I'm watching UFC and you're there, I'm going to pause that screen and I'm going to say, well, I know that guy is on my.
Yeah, I get people screenshotting stuff and sending it me. And I'm like, what are you doing? I just to me it's just a job. I'm not bothered about being on TV. I don't care whether my name's up there or anything. I just there to do a job, to do my bit for the sport.
So if we put coaching and judging to one side, Paul, and if we can just focus on your mixed martial arts experience as a competitor and an athlete, there's other people who will be on a similar conveyor belt, a lot a lot lower down than you. What sort of advice would you give them from your knowledge and experience that you've gained that you could cascade to them?
I would probably say, if I was talking to like a young kid who wanted to get into mixed martial arts, I would say the most important thing is probably get yourself under a really good coach and a really good gym. There's a lot of people teaching mixed martial arts not really like qualified, but there are some absolutely fantastic gyms out there and fantastic coaches. We've got such an amount of great knowledge in the UK. And I would probably say is do your research on the team that you're going to join or potentially want to join, and do your research on the coaches. A lot of people may say they've done this and that. If they have, there's going to be should be able to research that, and it should be readily available on the internet. But yeah, I would say probably just get yourself under a good mentor and a good coach, and someone who's proven over a period of time that they're good at their job and professional. If anyone's like a fighter, maybe they've had one or two sort of amateur fights and stuff, I would say don't rush to go to pro. I would say always try and serve your apprenticeship as an amateur first. Try and get with my guys, I try and get them at least 10 amateur fights even before I start thinking of where they're going like pro wise. Or some people may not ever get to pro, so you can still have a reasonable career as an amateur, and be successful and win titles as an amateur. Big misconception is going pro and doing this and thinking you're going to get in the UFC, and it's such a hard road. And there's very small amount of people that will actually get to that far. You've got to be realistic with your aspirations, and never in a rush.
Well, it's interesting you're saying that about the importance of amateur fights, because I asked this question from all the athletes and the coaches that have been on, and the majority of them always throw in that bit in the answer to say, look, take your time, do your amateur, do that. There's one that was saying, look, you need to have between 10 to 15 to 20 fights, because it doesn't matter that, like you said, it's your apprenticeship. Once that's done and you're at pro, you're kind of wiping the slate clean and you're starting off on your pro career, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. As I say, for me, until you've had 5, 6, 7 amount of amateur fights, you don't know what. As a coach, I don't know what I've got in an athlete until they fought for me at least 5 or 6 times. You're still developing. You're still learning about the mental side, the technique. Every fight you have, you should be technically better all the time, adding the pieces together. And then obviously once you go pro, you can't go back to amateur. So you have to be kind of like a finished article in terms of like your technique. Your technique's got to be there before you go, you go to pro. It's a very big step, and it should be sort of respected, not just jumping back and forth or I can't get a fight, so I'll just go pro now. Because once you do go pro, that's it. You can't really go back. And then obviously when you are a pro, it's picking the right fights for your progression as well. A lot of people will jump too far too soon. They end up getting a couple of losses, then they're out the sport, then they're demotivated. So it's picking the right fights. This is why I'm saying you need somebody good, a mentor above you, which will pick the right fights for you, because not always the fighter will always do that. So you got to pick the right fights for your progression and bring yourself or bring the athlete through at the right time, and take the right fights at the right time, which is really key to your development.
Paul, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us, and I look forward to having you on future podcasts. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to come on anytime you like.
Thank you.
Very appreciative of the opportunity.